Training camps are approaching. Leafs star forward Mitch Marner is still unsigned, and we did have an update on him today. So we'll talk about a potential trade and what the Sabres could do to get in the mix there. And I do think that that is not as crazy as you might think it is on the surface. I know. Also, big expectations, big pressure, maybe is the better way to say it, for the Sabres this year. That from Elliot Friedman today. All coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Sneaky Joe DiBiase on today's show. We're going to talk some Mitch Marner on today's show. The last big trade idea that presents itself in the NHL. And this could be a real trade idea, not just for the league, but maybe even for the Sabres. We'll get into that a little bit later on in today's show. There is an update on Marner from Elliot Friedman, who did an episode of 32 Thoughts this afternoon, and he did have a little bit on Marner in there. He also had a little bit on the Buffalo Sabres that we will get to on today's show. The preseason begins 2 weeks from tomorrow, so we are getting rapidly close to that. If you want to sign up for our text line, be sure to do that. You can head over to our text line, joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres is where you can hook up there. I have one text question from a texter today. Joe, the team needs to do something to get their in-game presentation better. Having only a video and player introductions at the beginning is literally worse than some AHL teams. What happened to the on-ice projection? What happened to Sabretooth coming down from the rafters? There is nothing happening at the beginning of the game to get the fans excited and hyped. It's kind of embarrassing how bad their player intros are. Not something I had thought about until it was pointed out here by this texter, but I don't disagree. There were seasons in the past where you had the on-ice projection. I've been to Leafs games. They have, I think, every night. It's some different version of it, some different presentation, whether it's nostalgia-filled or about the team currently. Yeah, the Sabres haven't had that in years that I can remember. Sabretooth coming down from the rafters was a staple, when I was a kid, but I think they brought it back a couple years ago. Maybe that was for the 50th anniversary, and maybe only for a game or two or even a year, and then that's been it. I have not seen Sabretooth rappelling from the rafters. I do think the Sabres have made improvements here. Not maybe in the beginnings of games. The live music during intermission, I think, is a nice touch. I think they've improved the food. Here they are with the brand new Jumbotron that looks really cool. So they've made these modest improvements little by little. But I don't have a counterpoint to this about the beginnings of games. I agree. I think they have their hype videos, and their videos at the beginning are pretty cool. They have the swords that come down in front of the bench, and I guess that's whatever. It's fine. It's not quite the coming out of the mouth of the shark like the San Jose Sharks do. Could they improve it? I think the answer to that is yes. I will say this, though. Just keep the name Pete Quelly in the back of your head for stuff like this, because he just arrived as the COO of the Buffalo Sabres and the Buffalo Bills. And in-game experience, from what I've read and talked to him about his background in sports, in-game experience, I think, is one of his specialties, coming from his time with the Charlotte Hornets. So we'll see if he has the resources to do stuff like he did with the Charlotte Hornets when he was working with Michael Jordan down in Charlotte. So keep that name in the back of your mind just to have a little bit of hope that maybe it will improve. But I can't tell you that for sure. I have no idea what they have planned for the beginning of the season and for the beginnings of games throughout the entire season. Anyways, we'll get into some more of your text questions throughout the coming shows and days as we get closer to training camp. We did a show last episode about Peyton Krebs and what the situation is for him contract-wise. If you missed that, check it out in the feed or on our YouTube channel. So let's get to, at the beginning here, What we heard from Elliot Friedman on his new episode of 32 Thoughts today, where he did talk about the Buffalo Sabres for about 3 minutes. And I got, there was some in there about Jesse Pegula, who made it to the U.S. Open final. Really cool there. Some cotton candy stuff. But the meat, I want to get to the meat of what Friedman had to say about the Sabres today before we get to Mitch Marner. He made some interesting comments that I want to talk more about next week. Quote, on the Sabres, this is a team internally that they've talked about a lot. If we don't go to the playoffs this year, there could be big consequences. Everyone here understands the pressure. There are no excuses this season. The rest of it, guys, it's not enough to talk about. There's enough talent there that they should be able to do it. If they don't do it this year, there's going to be consequences, and they know it. That's Elliot Friedman on the Buffalo Sabres. Not just saying, like, from the outside perspective, hey, there's pressure on them to make the playoffs. He's saying management, in my opinion, my paraphrase of what that all means is management, maybe coaching, whoever, anyone that works in the building knows, hey, if this year it doesn't happen, there's going to be consequences. It's going to get ugly. And that, to me, what does that make you think of immediately? The big question, I think, stemming from those comments is, does Kevyn Adams think he's got to do it this year? Does Kevyn Adams think, if I don't make the playoffs this year, I'm done as general manager as the Buffalo Sabres? Timeline-wise, it's about where it fits in, right? He's been the GM for a long while now. He goes back to being the GM when Ralph Krueger was the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. He's been the general manager for over 4 years now. And so far, they've had the best season of the drought, missing the playoffs by 1 point, but they've not made the playoffs in 4 years. If you start to get to a fifth year, 2020 to 2025, without making it, well, that's guys get fired for a lot less than that as general managers. So that reads like, to me, Adams knows it's got to happen now. I don't know what that means for Lindy, though. You know, like, it does make me think about how much rope the GM does. I don't know, though, what it would mean about Lindy. The timeline there is so different, and his place in the organization is so different. The backing of Pegula at their press conference this summer, that, I don't know, would Lindy be one and done? Wouldn't they give him more of a chance than that? But I don't know, because a new GM comes in, he's going to want his own guy, isn't he? So I don't know. I don't know what to make of Lindy's part of that. I think that's a lot tougher to figure out. Adams, I don't think it's tough to figure out at all. That reads like, to me, Adams is treating this season as it's do or die. I've got to make the playoffs now, or I'm going to be out of a job. It also could mean consequences for the players as a group. We've already seen some of those, right? Casey Middlesack gets traded. The group's already been broken up a little bit, but I was getting into this with Joe Marino from the Charging Buffalo on Twitter earlier about how all the Sabres have all these RFAs coming up next year, and they have cap space now, but they're going to be spending a lot of it next year when JJ Peterka is up for a contract, and Jack Quinn's up for a contract, and Bo Byram is up for a contract, and so is Devin Levi, and so is Ryan Johnson, and so is maybe Peyton Krebs again. It's a long list. All those guys are valuable. But can anybody see the Buffalo Sabres missing the playoffs again and Terry Pegula saying, oh yeah, I'll just hand all you guys a check. I'll write a check for all you guys, and bringing back the same group? Can you see them as a core all getting paid? I don't. Consequences, to me, what Friedman talks about here, extend beyond the GM. Consequences go to the players. And to me, the consequences to the players would be, you guys aren't getting a fourth full season together as a group. Enough's enough. We're breaking this thing up. We're making trades. We're sending guys out. We're not paying everybody. We're not paying everybody. So I don't think they would draw the line at Peterka. I don't think they would draw the line at Quinn. Maybe they would trade someone that's already under contract. Maybe they would say, all right, you know, we're not going to use all this space just to bring back our own and go again. We're going to trade Matthias Samuelsson, or we're going to trade Dylan Cousins, or no, we're not going to repay Devin Levi. I don't like that idea, but hey, maybe they say that. Maybe they say we're not paying Ryan Johnson. We're not bringing Peyton Krebs back again. They could say, maybe they say we're trying to trade Owen Power in some mega deal. I don't know, but the idea of rewarding the whole core and keeping them all together after 4 years of not getting the job done, I don't know. I hesitate to think, one, that makes sense, and two, that Terry Pegula would be on board with giving everybody a check if they haven't got the job done. So that's what consequences mean to me. I think about the GM. I think about the players for that. The GM, number one, though, and then I have no idea what to think about Lindy in framing him into that conversation. When we come back, Mitch Marner. How realistic a trade idea is it? What kind of update do we get from Elliot Friedman today? And if he is a realistic trade idea in the league, how realistic is he for the Buffalo Sabres? That coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Check out Locked On NHL as they get you ready for the upcoming NHL season. Of course, a lot about Johnny Gaudreau this week as well. And if you're looking for some football, of course, check out Locked On Bills with Joe Marino as the Bills get ready for the Cardinals on Sunday. Mitch Marner. Let's talk a little bit about the Leafs, and let's talk, it's the offseason, but the offseason's winding down, and a lot of our transaction ideas, whether that was free agency, whether that was trade ideas, whether that was trades that happened, like Savoy for Ryan McLeod. We've talked a lot about trades and movement this summer. Well, it's about over. I think there's only one player left talking about. Laine's been dealt, right? Draisaitl just signed in Edmonton, so I'm not going near that I didn't before. The lone person left in the league to me that is worth a discussion, that's interesting at the same time, is Mitch Marner, who is going into a contract year with the Toronto Maple Leafs, has been subject to a lot of criticism in Toronto, most recently these last playoffs for not showing up, and to my surprise, he's been the one that's been scapegoated. If I would have done shows 3 years ago on the Leafs and told you who's Toronto going to scapegoat. It's not going to be Matthews. He's too good. It's not going to be Marner. He's the local kid, right? He's from Markham, just 20 minutes away. Although traffic in Toronto, usually it's more like 45 minutes away. Marner's the golden boy. They're not going to scapegoat him. It's going to be Nylander, right? Swedish kid, maybe not the hardest player in the world to play against, had fallen short of expectations a few times in his career, wanted the big payday. That hasn't happened. Nylander, in part, that's because he's stepped up. He's done well. Here we are after 7 years, and who's the guy that is subject to more criticism than any of them in that group? It's Mitch Marner. And a big reason for that is last year, 3 points in 7 playoff games, playing 21 minutes a night, 1 goal in a 7-game series. And you had a clip. Remember, there was a clip, a bench clip, where we saw the video of Marner kind of getting an earful from his teammates, including, I think it was Nylander and Matthews. They were all kind of going at Marner on the bench. So, all right, Mitch Marner. By the way, it's not just 1 goal last year. It was 3 goals in 11 games before that. He's always been more of a playmaker in the playoffs, but there are numbers to back up. He goes down in the postseason. I mean, just strictly, you could just look at career numbers. I could get more in depth than that, but he's got 639 points in 576 career regular season games. So well over a point per game in the regular season. Playoffs, 50 points in 57 games, including only 11 goals. And that's where the problem really exists, I think, for Marner. But it's not just that; he needs the contract, and it sounds like the Leafs in Marner's camp are just not on the same page right now for what that means, what he's worth. Does he think he's worth what Draisaitl just got? Leon Draisaitl just became the highest paid player in the league. He's not the best player in his team, but this happened with Malkin in Pittsburgh like a decade ago. Just because sometimes you got to pay the guy to accept living in someone else's shadow. Malkin got paid more than Crosby the last 10 years. Why? One, Crosby accepted that, but two, Malkin had to sign up for being second fiddle. Draisaitl may be a little bit of the same thing. We're paying you extra because you've got to live in McDavid's shadow. Marner may be a little bit of that with Matthews there, and even Nylander to a lesser extent. So, is it realistic he gets traded? Here's what Elliot Friedman said on the matter. He said, quote, "I don't know the way this is going to end. The agent believes in walking his players to free agency unless you give him a reason not to. Everyone's going to regret it if he leaves. I think it's been in and out talking contract this summer." That's Elliot Friedman on the Marner situation today. He does give voice, and he is someone that has talked a couple times like this. He's the biggest insider in the game. And from what he's heard, and he talks, I'm sure, Leaf people all the time. He's based out of Toronto, right? He sounds very open to the idea that Mitch Marner is not going to be a Toronto Maple Leaf 1 year from today. Much more open to it than I would have thought. Could that mean trade? Would the Leafs want to trade him before this season gets rolling? That's where the door sounds like it's a little bit open, that the Leafs don't want to lose him for nothing. And if the agent is like, yeah, we're good walking to free agency, and they test the Leafs on that, well, do the Leafs say, well, we're not risking it here. We're going to cash out and get something mega back in exchange. And we're not going to risk losing this dude for nothing. It's not going to happen. And we're not going to trade him at the deadline, right? And then integrate a guy midway through the year when we're probably going to be in a playoff spot. Just that gets tricky then. So that's where the trade idea comes from with Mitch Marner. Last year, 85 points in 69 games for Marner. That was a year removed from a 99-point season in 80 games. And before that, 97 points in 72 games. If you look at his charts over at Evolving Hockey, he's one of the best players in the league. He's one of the best playmakers, one of the best play drivers in the league. Yes, he plays a lot with Austin Matthews, but he absolutely does his job. 94th percentile for offense, 51st percentile for defense. That's last year. If you look at over a 3-year sample size for Mitch Marner, all of the last 3 years combined, he's a 96th percentile offensive player and an 80th percentile defensive player. He's an elite hockey player. He is definitely worth $12 million per year plus. So he's also a little older, 27 years old. Just a little. He's part of the Eichel draft. What would he cost? And I think I've kind of got to here as an overall, to summarize this segment. I think it's realistic to think he could be traded. I don't know that I'd want to predict it right now. I'd probably lean towards he's going to sign, but it's realistic to me that he would be traded. Is it actually realistic the Sabres would? Let me make the case why it would be realistic the Sabres would make a deal here and why I could actually see it happening. I'll try to make the case. I'll try to convince you. I know it's going to be a tough sell for a lot of people, but I'll give you my best shot when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by Game Time. We've got preseason games coming up to check out. You got football games, and you can get tickets to all of them over at Game Time. A new feature on Game Time called Game Time Picks makes getting tickets for your favorite live event even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Super deals at Game Time, as good as it gets, as well as other tiers of deals. You could go through and look at whether it's deals that are closer to kickoff or closer to the start of a hockey game. The prices of seats even go lower as you get closer to to the game itself. You get views of your seat, panoramic view of your seat when you're scrolling through, looking through what you want. All-in pricing is available on Game Time. The lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And they also have the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Let's talk some Mitch Marner, and specifically, all right, let's talk Mitch Marner to the Buffalo Sabres. Not an idea that's brand new. We've talked about it here on this show before. I know Sabre fans probably think about it once in a while, or, you know, have had a buddy at a bar ask them about it before. I've done a show on the Sabres getting Marner back in May as a trade idea. But now that we approach the season, he's still unsigned, and I think this is about to become more newsworthy as the Leafs are going to get closer to showing up for training camp here, and he's still not signed. All right, Marner, let's get to it. Why is it realistic? The best I could do for you, and I don't think it's that bad of a take, is honestly his situation. He is a star player that, you know, I'll go with the angle of, hey, Buffalo's as close to Toronto as you could get if you don't want to play in Toronto anymore. And I don't know that Marner doesn't want to play in Toronto anymore. I also don't know, though, that he does. I don't know how he, as a person, takes in all of that pressure, that circus that Toronto is, and now being a bit more of the lightning rod than he's ever been before. I don't know how he's reacted to that. Not everybody reacts well to it. And if you were ever going to get a breakup between Marner and the Leafs, this is how it would look. It would be a bit of a split between the fan base and the team and Marner. And you would get a contract dispute like this right after the guy doesn't perform in the postseason. And the Leafs are left wondering, can we trust this guy in the biggest moments? There would be a lot of question marks about that. And Marner, my sales pitch, if I were Kevin Adams, or I guess whoever would be the Sabres GM at this meeting, if I were to go to Mitch Marner and I had the opportunity to try to convince him that, hey, if you're going to move on, this is the place to do it. What's my sales pitch? My sales pitch is a tough one. The Panthers probably have a better sales pitch. The Golden Knights probably have a better sales pitch. But I'm going to make an effort here, and it's going to be, you're a Toronto kid. You're a Southern Ontario, Toronto kid. This is an opportunity for you to be a drive away. And we say that about a lot of guys. And most times it ends up not mattering, right? There are other reasons that matter more. Winning is one big reason. The reputation of the organization is another big one. You can't overcome all of those other issues by just telling a guy from Toronto, hey, we're close to Toronto, you should come here. It has happened before, though. I believe a big reason why Jeff Skinner stayed here was because it was close to home. And I think you find that once in a while with players. And hopefully this would be a once in the while. Hopefully, maybe. I don't know if everyone's going to like this idea. So my sales pitch is, you don't have to go too far from home. You're going to be a drive away, and we are going to take you out of the circus. We're going to take you away from all that pressure, away from being that lightning rod, away from having tremendous regular seasons, and then all that pressure in the playoffs, if you do come up short, being a target from fans. Here, you make the playoffs, you'll be a god. You'll have a statue built for you for breaking this drought if you come here and break the drought. Come to Buffalo, break the drought, and you will be a king for it. You will be seen as, like, we'll open the decks for you. I don't know how much he'll care about, again, these are tough arguments when you don't know what the person's like. How much does Marner care about being the center of attention, about being the number one, you know, being the star of the team? Because in Toronto, he's not that, as long as Austin Matthews is. But here, I know they got Dahlin. I know Tage Thompson's on the team. Mitch Marner's the star of the team if he comes here. He's the guy that's putting up the most points. He's the guy that, to me, is playing the most ice time. He's on the number one power play unit. He's probably wearing a letter, I would think. I think he's treated as a superstar, one of the faces of the franchise, if not the face of the franchise, if he were to come to Buffalo. And if you want a little cherry on top, a little something to put in your back pocket, he's a big Bills fan because I've seen him probably 10 times on Instagram, either be at a Bills game or wearing a Bills jacket. So again, I don't know if he cares about the Bills, but he likes them. I know that. I know Dylan Cousins has posted on Instagram at him about that. So Bills fan from the area-ish, right? Toronto. Okay, not quite Buffalo. But that's the sales pitch. And it would be, we're going to pay, the Sabres would have to do this with any player of this magnitude. They have to be willing to pay him more than anybody else. Okay? That's how you get Marner on board. Now, how to get the Leafs on board. That's an in-division trade. And they're going to be hesitant to do it. And let's be honest, Marner would be one of the best players to hit the trade market in a long time, probably since Jack Eichel. So, you got to outbid probably like 20 plus teams to get this guy, which means you got to overpay. It's got to hurt if you're going to pull that trade off. And this is where I might lose some people. I might lose some Sabre fans and say, okay, now I'm out. I don't want to give this, and this all up. Because for Marner, you got to overpay. I almost think it has to look like a bad trade if you want to acquire him, because somebody's going to be willing to give more than they should. And he's that good a player. So what hurts? You have to make it hurt. I want to include in any trade idea for Marner to get the Leafs on board and to get them to trade him in division. I think to pull it off, you got to include one of two players. Owen Power or JJ Peterka. Those are the two names that come to mind for me. That would hurt. That would sting to include either one of those guys in there. And I know there are a lot of people that wouldn't even trade Power for Marner straight up. If I knew I was getting Marner under contract, I think I would do it. Just given the state of the Sabres, where they are in their build, how good Marner is, how proven Marner is, I would take the risk of looking like an idiot when Power turns into a legit top pair defenseman for the next 15 years by trading him for a 27-year-old. I would take that risk. It would be tough to swallow, though. And it probably would be more than him. Peterka, same thing. Man, he's a great player, and I think the ceiling is super high for him, even higher than what we've seen already. But that's what you're going to have to give up if you're going to outbid all these other teams. Like, I don't think just, hey, let's give them Zach Benson, a #1 pick, Ryan Johnson, and Noah Ostlund, one of our first-round prospects. Here's these 4 things that are all pretty valuable. And our top young player in the organization, I don't think that gets it done. Other teams can match that. The Sabres would have to be willing to give up a price that nobody else can match. And let's be clear, let's be honest, the Sabres have such a pool of young players and prospects and guys on the roster right now. Even with trading Matthew Savoy, they have a young crop that I don't think everyone can match. Pittsburgh can't match it, right? They can't match trading a Peterka. Who else? I don't think Vegas can match trading a JJ Peterka right now. They've kind of already made their Marner trades. So that's where I'm at with Marner. And I think that's where a lot of Sabre fans will be like, okay, no, I don't need that. I don't need to trade JJ Peterka and a first-round pick and this to get Mitch Marner. I don't need to trade Owen Power and Konsta Helenius to get Mitch Marner. I don't need it that bad. But for me, you know, we're more than a decade into this drought. I've got a player that is one of the best forwards in the National Hockey League that puts up 90-plus points every year that he's healthy and gets to play a full season, that COVID doesn't interrupt or a lockout doesn't interrupt or whatever. Marner is an elite player to me, and I think he would be the best player on the Buffalo Sabres. I think offensively, he'd be the most trusted scoring player on the Buffalo Sabres the second he showed up on the team. And it would be very tough for me to not be willing to overpay for that. So that's where I'm at. I'm more open to the Marner idea probably than most. And I'm more open to the idea that it could actually happen than most. I think it makes a little bit of sense that he could actually get out of there. His agent being a tough-nosed guy in these departments is another reason why I'm open to it. Darren Ferris, I believe, is the name of the agent. Somebody that can get his players the best deal and be willing to leave. So the agent's a part of the puzzle as well. Let me know what you think. Would you be willing to get Mitch Marner, do a Mitch Marner trade if I told you it was really going to hurt, that you'd have to overpay for it, including a Peterka or an Owen Power? I think a lot of fans would say no, but maybe some would say yes. If you want to give a thought on that, you could do that on our Twitter page at Locked On Sabres, or you could shoot us a text on our Locked On Sabres text line. If you are not already a subscriber to our Locked On Sabres text line, you could do that by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. Super easy. Just put your number in, sign up there, and then from there, you're just texting back and forth. As the season gets closer, less than a month away, and 2 weeks from tomorrow is the beginning of the preseason. That's going to do it for us today here on our Locked On Sabres podcast. We will talk more in our next show about those expectations for Kevyn Adams. And next week, we will also finish off talking about the Atlantic Division. We hit the pause button on that this week, but we'll get back into it. We'll talk about the Detroit Red Wings. We'll talk about the Montreal Canadiens as well, who are a little interesting after making the Laine trade in the last couple of weeks. That's going to do it for us today here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Enjoy the Bills game on Sunday. Get them on a month of the Bills without any Sabres. And then we'll get rolling into both seasons. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for listening and making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.